Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to take you through the complete process of installing MongoDB on Windows and then using a MongoDB job within RackForms. So there's a couple different steps here. I generally jotted them down right here. Obviously, as versions of Windows change, as MongoDB itself changes, and as PHP changes, some of these steps may vary, but in general, broad strokes, this should get us up and running with a full MongoDB setup. So step number one, if we haven't already done it already, is to install Mongo. Of course, this is going to be very highly dependent on your particular server and architecture. But in general, we can go to this docs.mongodb.org and basically just select the type of architecture we want to install to. In this case, again, it's Windows. And we will essentially download the MongoDB software. Now, when we do that, if I go to my actual downloads folder right here, we'll get something that looks like this. So I'm just basically going to double click this to run it. And we're going to go through a basic series of steps here. I'm going to actually select the complete installation. You can certainly customize it if you want to, but for now, we're just going to keep it simple. And this will then go through the process of installing the MongoDB software. Now, what's interesting about Mongo is it really doesn't have any system requirements or, I should say dependencies. So that means that when we actually run this, it's just going to put it as almost like a regular self-contained program would be. It doesn't kind of sprinkle itself all over the place. And so we can actually see that if we go into our programs file right here. We'll actually just see Mongo. Actually, let me go to program files. We'll just see MongoDB, and then it exists under server, the version, and bin. So we just have Mongo .mongodb.exe right here. So very, very simple to find that. Now, it is important, and I kind of bring that up because the documentation actually seems to get this a little bit wrong. I don't think they actually anticipated us doing the complete installation because the documentation makes reference of Mongo just being installed in the C drive. Unfortunately, it's not. It's actually in the program files. And this was going to come into play in just a few seconds here when we start up the server. But for right now, we should have the Mongo software installed on our machine. Now, in order for Mongo to work, we need a data directory and optionally a place to put our logs. So we're going to run these two commands right here from an administrative prompt. We're just going to MD to data and DB. And then we're going to MD data and log. And this will give us a nice place to keep our data and keep logs. With that done, then, we're going to create a quoted path to where Mongo is residing. The reason why we're creating a quoted path here, if you're not too familiar with Windows, is this file path here has spaces in it. So we need to quote it because of that. But provided we do that, and provided we have the correct path, we should be able to hit return, and we'll now start up the MongoDB server. Okay, so we're almost done. Now what we need to do is make sure that PHP can communicate with Mongo. To do that, we need a driver. And this is, again, going to vary highly depending on the type of installation that you have. For Windows, it's actually very, very simple. We're simply going to go to, probably to start off, this PHP page right here where we can actually find some general information about it. When we click on this, we're actually going to be taken here to a install process that's using Pickle. Unfortunately, I don't have Pickle installed, but some user right here was actually nice enough to provide a link to where the DLL can be found. And if you've ever done this on Windows before, that's how extensions in PHP work, is their little DLL files. So we'll actually follow that link, and it takes us to something like this. We do need to figure out which one of these we want to download. This requires 3 pieces of information: the PHP version that we're running, whether we're thread safe or not, and what architecture we're using. The easiest way to find that information is to fire up IIS. Hopefully you're using Web Platform Installer and further the PHP Manager for Web Platform Installer. If you're not already doing that, you're using Windows, you really, really should do that. And the reason why is, I think you're about to see, very obvious. It's much, much easier to do PHP operations like this. So specifically, I need to get those 3 pieces of information. So I'm just going to load up this item here in IIS, and I'm going to check my PHP info. And this will then tell me the version of PHP I have, 5.6.0. This will tell me the architecture, x86. And then finally, it'll tell me if I have thread safety enabled. In this case, it's disabled. So knowing those 3 pieces of information, I know that I need PHP 5.6, the non-thread safe version of the x86 architecture plugin. So I went ahead and downloaded that, and then this will once again go into our downloads folder, and we will open this, and then we will take the DLL file, the php_mongo.dll, and I just put that on my desktop as I did right here. The reason why we do that is back in IIS, we're going to back up one level, and we're going to use this add an extension link right here. And then we're simply going to provide a path to this DLL file. So we'd go to desktop, PHP Mongo, open it. And then we'd hit OK, and this will install the extension. Now, I've already done that, so I'm not going to hit OK here, but that's what we do. And now we should have, if we check our PHP info again here, we should be able to just search for the text Mongo, and we should see the implementation details of that particular extension. Okay, so we should be good to go now. I can actually close IIS at this point. In order to test this in RackForms, I'll make this a quick little process here, but if you want to make sure that Mongo is actually working, the easiest way to do that is to go to Load Example Job and scroll down to the MongoDB section right here, and you're going to have a job right here called Basic Operations Tutorial. So go ahead and load that, and then this actually has, using these little query items right here, all the common operations that we'd want to perform with Mongo. So for example, we start off this job by dropping any collection that we've defined right here, in this case, RackForms, and the collection name called FB Demo. Then we want to insert some data, so we do that twice. We use one insert right here, so the query mode is set to insert, and we're going to insert this data right here. Then we actually run a second insert, which is going to insert a second user for us. Then we want to demonstrate how we read data. So here then we switch our Mongo query mode to query or read, and then this is actually then going to dump out the result of that query to the screen. We're going to see that in just a second, and the way we do that is by setting SQL debug data return mode to data dump, and so this will actually show us the data that we've returned. And then finally, we show a few other things like how we update data, how we delete documents, and so on. And so just to quickly show you what a working version looks like here, I'll go ahead and save this job. And as we can see here now, oops, we actually have a problem right here. Looks like we're getting an error. So this is actually good right here. I didn't actually expect that, but we'll go to error messages right here. And let's see if we can't figure out what this specific error message is. And looks like it's good now. So it looks like we maybe just didn't have... Maybe we didn't accept the connection the first time. So that's kind of interesting right there. I'm actually going to rerun this job. We're going to try that one more time right here. I've actually never seen that before. Let me just run this here. So maybe we just didn't have Mongo listing correctly. So anyway, the point being that here we can see now that wherever we have one of these yellow boxes, this is what's actually happened from one of our MongoDB operations. So for example, here's where I've inserted my two records right here. You can actually see that we're returning the identifiers for those two insert operations. Here's where we're actually, I'll actually move this over right here. Here's where we're actually displaying that data. So here is where the reading data, and we're actually kind of querying it out right here. So that's where that goes. And basically you can see here that this is now displaying all the information from our various queries as we perform them. So hopefully this gives you a pretty good view of what these operations look like behind the scenes. So I shall leave it at that. Any other questions or tips and tricks that you learned, please let us know at info@rackforms.com. Actually, one other quick note right here. I should probably say that MongoDB support is usually limited to just the query modules. So in other words, if we're going to try to create a form where we're going to write to a database, we need to use the query module to do that. Generally speaking, as I always like to say, if we're just reading, writing, or updating data, we can use Mongo in the way we're doing in this sample job right here. If we want to use some automated tools in RackForms, however, such as the builder module type or doing data insert using SQL+, we do need to use one of the standard and traditional databases like SQL Server or MySQL. In other words, we try to usually enforce that if you're trying to do relational data or data that you're inserting in multiple places, usually stick with a relational database for that. Use Mongo for doing like document storage. And so that'll be perfectly fine for that, but generally speaking, the built-in features of RackForms are going to require that you have a standard database item. So I shall leave it at that. Now I will say in closing, any other questions or comments, please let us know at info@rackforms.com, and thanks for watching.